Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly back in time. No need for a time machine, just let your imagination do the work. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a medieval village, perhaps somewhere in the English countryside, or maybe in a tiny hamlet nestled between the forests and hills of the Holy Roman Empire. The air is sharp, so sharp it seems to slice right through your many layers, and with each breath, your lungs sting from the cold. Your boots crunch on the frozen ground, leaving faint tracks in the frost that sparkles faintly beneath the waning light of the setting sun. Before you stretches a scene of quiet urgency. Villagers scurry about with purpose, stacking firewood in hurried, uneven piles, dragging bundles of straw toward the animal pens, patching roofs and walls with whatever materials they can find. Children chase down chickens too foolish to find shelter, while dogs dart between legs, tails low against the chill. The first frost has come, not a gentle warning, but a declaration. Winter has arrived, and it's here to stay for a while. And you, my friend, are absolutely not ready. Let's be honest, you probably won't survive this, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, it only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you drop a comment with your location and the time where you are right now. It's always fascinating to see where people are tuning in from across the world. Now, let's dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cold is not just outside, it seeps into everything. The air inside your small timber-and daub hut is barely warmer than the air beyond its thin walls. The single tiny window lets in a sliver of pale light but no warmth. You can see your breath as you exhale, small clouds of proof that the cold has entered your home as surely as it has taken over the land. The walls, made of a lattice of wooden strips packed with mud and straw, were never designed to withstand this. They crack in places, letting in slender fingers of freezing air that caress your neck and wrists, no matter how tightly you wrap yourself. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers considered the first frost a sign to hunker down, or simply another turn of the year's wheel, something to endure, like all the other challenges of life. But as you stand here, pulling your threadbare cloak tighter around your shoulders, you feel the weight of the season settling upon you. Outside, the last of the harvest is being hurried into storage. Baskets of root vegetables, turnips, onions are lowered into pits lined with straw, covered with earth to keep them from freezing. Grain sacks are stacked in corners of huts, covered with blankets or animal skins. It's not much, but it's all that stands between the village and hunger. A neighbor passes by, his face red from cold and effort, dragging a sled piled high with firewood, his breath coming in puffs like steam from a kettle. And speaking of firewood, you glance at your own dwindling stack and feel a flicker of worry. The cold has just begun, and already the fuel is going faster than you'd like. You'll need to gather more soon, braving the woods at the edge of the village where wolves might prowl, or worse, where no fallen branches can be found, and you're forced to consider cutting down a tree that will take hours of labor to fell and split. A quirky detail floats through your mind: how in some parts of medieval Europe, people believed that certain trees offered better protection against the cold. When burned, ash was favored for its steady flame, while elder was often avoided, not because it burned poorly, but because folklore warned that elderwood burned would invite bad luck or restless spirits. As if winter wasn't bad enough without adding angry ghosts to the mix. The sky darkens quickly, as it always does this time of year. The sun seems eager to flee the cold, leaving you and your fellow villagers to the mercy of the night. Inside your hut, you kneel by the hearth, coaxing the small fire back to life with bits of kindling and careful breaths. The smoke curls upward, stinging your eyes before it finds its way out through the hole in the roof. The fire is small, the wood precious, but the warmth it offers is worth every splinter and burn. Your family, or maybe just you alone, gathers near the hearth as the light fades. The walls creak in the wind. Outside, the village settles into uneasy rest. You hear the lowing of cattle being led into the barn, the clatter of a last bucket being dropped beside the well, the latch of a neighbor's door drawn tight. The world shrinks as night falls, and with it the cold deepens, creeping in at every opportunity, wrapping itself around your home, your clothes, your very bones. You pull your blanket tighter, a patchwork of wool and fur and whatever else you could stitch together, and sit close to the fire. The flames dance, casting flickering shadows that make the small space seem larger than it is. And for a moment, just a moment, you allow yourself to believe that the little blaze will be enough, that the food you've stored will last, that spring will come before the cold can take too great a toll. But the wind outside reminds you otherwise, rattling the shutters, finding its way through every crack. You close your eyes, listening to its lonely song, and settle in for the first of many long, cold nights to come. You rise before dawn because you have no choice. The cold doesn't wait for sunlight. In fact, you can barely tell whether the sun is up at all. The inside of your hut is dim and gray, lit only by the smoldering coals in the hearth and the faintest ghost of early morning light pushing in through the window shutter. You're already wrapped in 2 layers of wool, but it feels like none at all. The tips of your fingers are stiff, your toes long gone to numbness. And yet, the first order of business is always the same. Get dressed. Medieval layering is an art. A scratchy, awkward, vaguely damp art. You begin with a linen undertunic. If you're lucky enough to have one that's not too threadbare, it's cold against your skin at first, but it's your one breathable layer. Over that goes the wool tunic, heavier, a little warmer, and just itchy enough to keep you awake. You add leggings, also wool, held up with whatever bits of cord or belt you can find. Then come the woolen shoes or hose, not exactly elegant, but effective at preventing the cold from biting directly at your legs. Layer 3 is all about bulk. A surcoat, a second tunic, maybe even a third if your arms can still bend. You pull your cloak around your shoulders, heavy with age and the scent of long dead fires. If you're fortunate, the cloak has fur, trim rabbit. If you're lucky, something smellier if not. You tug at clothes with numb fingers and tie the cord around your chest in a hasty knot that you'll probably redo twice before. Breakfast. Historians still argue whether the average peasant had access to more than 2 or 3 sets of clothes in winter. Judging by the number of times you've worn this outfit without washing it, the answer is probably barely. But here, layering is more than fashion, it's insulation. It's how you survive. Your feet are next. Woolen socks are more likely, strips of cloth wrapped around your feet like primitive bandages. Into the boots they go, stiff leather, often lined with straw or fur scraps, or just filled with more cloth if you're running low on imagination. The boots creak as you tighten the laces. They're heavy, water-stained, and beginning to split near the soles. You make a mental note to find pitch to patch them, or better yet, barter for a cobbler's help if you have anything left worth trading, and then come the gloves. If they could be called that. More like finger pouches, really. 2 pieces of wool sewn together, a thumb hole, and no ambition beyond basic function. You shove your hands into them and flex your fingers well. You try. The cold has already taken hold. A quirky little tidbit comes to mind. Some villagers in the north swore by stuffing dried moss into their sleeves and collars to seal the warmth in. Sounds ridiculous, right? But when you're walking through a gale that feels like it's made of needles, a little moss doesn't sound so bad. You glance at a shard of polished metal propped against the wall. What looks back at you is a bundle of cloth with eyes, a moving pile of wool and effort. You can barely move your arms. Your knees creak when you bend, and you have the distinct posture of a badly constructed scarecrow. But you are warmish. And in winter, that's a fashion statement all its own. Outside, the wind howls again, and you brace yourself. The cold doesn't knock it, just walks right in. Your breath fogs instantly as you push open the door. The sun has risen barely, casting everything in a pale, flat light. You step out, layered like an onion, and immediately feel the draft snake down your neck, despite all your effort. You tug your hood forward and curse softly into the morning air. Children dart past, their cheeks pink from the cold, wrapped in whatever patchwork garments could be stitched together from old scraps. They look like runaway laundry baskets, but they're laughing, throwing snow and chasing each other across the frozen ground. Even now, in the bitter cold, joy finds a way to sneak in. You shuffle toward the woodshed to check your dwindling supply. Each step feels like moving through molasses. Your layers slow you down, your boots heavy, your limbs uncooperative. You're warm enough to function, and that's all that matters. Historians still debate whether medieval folks adapted to the cold better than modern people, or whether they simply endured it with a kind of gritted teeth fatalism. As you lift a log, feeling its weight in your aching arms, you think, probably both. You have no other option. There is no thermostat to crank up, no hot shower waiting. There is only you, your layers, your fire, and your will to see this winter through. You drag the logs inside, your cloak snagging on the doorframe. You mutter under your breath and shake loose the fabric, the fringe now iced with snow. Inside, you feed the fire, peeling off your outermost layer just enough to kneel and coax the flames higher. 1 layer off, 14 to go. But for now, you're warmer than you were a moment ago. You can move your fingers. Your feet have begun to tingle again. And your breath doesn't fog quite so heavily in the air. It's not comfort, not really. But it's enough. The morning light does little to warm your bones as you settle back inside your hut. Having trudged through snow and biting wind just to fetch enough wood to keep the hearth alive, the air inside feels no less frigid despite the meager protection offered by your walls. You pause for a moment near the door, shaking snow from your boots and cloak, watching the flakes melt slowly into dark spots on the packed earth floor. The hut is small, cramped, even, but it's home. The walls are made of wattle and daub, the wooden slats and mud mixture that seemed sturdy enough when first built but now betray their flaws with every gust of wind that rattles through. A draft worms its way through cracks you swore you patched last week, brushing cold fingers against your neck and ankles. You draw your cloak tighter, but the chill is relentless. Your gaze drifts over the simple furnishings. A rough-hewn table, scarred by years of use, sits near the hearth. Bench, a stool, and perhaps a single battered chair, its seat sagging from age. Against one wall, a chest where you keep what few valuables you have. 3 bare linens, your best tunic saved for holy days. A small pouch with a few coins that feel heavier with importance than value. The bed, if you can call it that, is a low wooden frame with a mattress of straw stuffed into a coarse sack. You know too well how the cold creeps up through that straw at night, as if the earth itself conspires to steal away your warmth. Historians still argue whether the medieval peasant home was considered a refuge or merely endured. But as you stand, here now, breath misting before your face inside your own walls, you lean toward the latter. The hut shelters you from the snow, yes, but not from the cold that seems to seep through every surface. You cross to the hearth where the small fire sputters and smokes. The stones blackened from years of use. The smell of wood smoke clings to everything: your clothes, your skin, your hair. You kneel to prod the coals, blowing gently, coaxing reluctant flames to life. The fire crackles, embers glowing brighter, and you add another log, watching as the flames eagerly lick up its sides. A quirky tidbit flickers through your mind. In some villages, people believed it was bad luck to let the hearth fire go out entirely in winter, fearing it would invite misfortune or illness. You can understand why. Starting a new fire from cold embers is a misery you wouldn't wish on anyone, not with numb fingers and damp kindling. The smoke curls upward, seeking escape through the hole in the roof meant for just that purpose. But the hole does its job only when the wind cooperates. On days like this, the smoke lingers, swirling around the rafters, stinging your eyes, making you cough. The smell is sharp, acrid, but also strangely reassuring. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And where there's fire, there's life. You sit on the low stool, hands outstretched to the warmth. The heat reaches your palms first, then slowly, mercifully, begins to thaw your fingers. Your boots steam where the snow clings to them, and you tug them off to place your feet closer to the hearth. The floor is cold, even through your stockings, but the fire's glow is a small, welcome comfort. The hut groans softly as the wind presses against it, reminder that the cold is always waiting, always testing the limits of your shelter. You glance at the window, a mere shuttered gap in the wall, covered with oiled cloth to keep out the worst of the drafts. Still, the wind finds its way in, sighing through the cracks, stirring the edge of your cloak where it pools around your feet. You take stock of what little you have inside. A pot of stew, thin and stretched, hangs over the fire, the scent of onions and root vegetables filling the space. A loaf of bread hard as wood sits on the table, a knife beside it. The food will last if you're careful, but it's another thing that weighs on your mind as the winter stretches ahead. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants found moments of comfort in their homes, or whether survival was the only constant. You sip from a wooden cup of weak ale, the liquid warm from the fire, and wonder if perhaps it's both. The walls may be thin, the wind persistent, the cold omnipresent, but for now, here beside the fire, you have created a small pocket of peace. The dog shifts beside you, seeking warmth, and you rest a hand on its back. Feeling the steady rise and fall of its breath, the fire pops, sending a small spray of sparks into the air, and for a fleeting moment, you let yourself believe that the cold outside has been held at bay, if only for a while. Night falls swiftly, as it always does in winter, wrapping the world in darkness long before you're ready for it. Inside the hut, the hearth glows dimly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The cold presses close, eager to claim any space. The fire's warmth fails to reach. You add another log, watching as the flames leap up, then settle into a steady crackle. The heat feels like a small miracle, but you know it won't last the night unless you ration your wood carefully. You turn toward the bed, or, more accurately, the heap of straw and coarse cloths that serves as one. The mattress, if it could be called that, is stuffed with straw that rustles with every movement, poking through the rough sackcloth to scratch at your skin. You've lined it with whatever scraps you could find, an old cloak, bits of fur, the remains of a once-proud tapestry now frayed beyond recognition. It isn't comfort. It's necessity. In winter, sleeping is a communal affair. Privacy is a luxury for warmer times. You settle down, pulling the blankets up to your chin, feeling the weight of them press close. Beside you lies your family, your partner, your children, if you have them, perhaps even a servant or aging parent. Bodies crowd together, not for affection alone, but for survival. Each person's warmth the shield against the cold that seeps in through the walls. The floor, the very air you breathe. Historians still argue whether this practice of shared sleeping arrangements was born purely of necessity, or if it also reinforced the bonds of family and community. You suspect it's both. In the dark and cold, there is comfort in the nearness of another heartbeat, another breath mingling with your own in the chill night air. The dog curls at your feet, its body a living hot stone against your toes. The children, if they are small enough, are nestled between the adults, swaddled in wool and linen, their cheeks pink with warmth, their hair damp from the heat of too many layers. You shift slightly, adjusting the edge of a blanket, tucking it more tightly around a shoulder where the draft sneaks in. The hut creaks as the wind pushes against it. Outside, the world is a frozen, silent expanse. Inside, there's only the soft rustle of straw, the occasional cough, the sound of slow, even breathing. The fire pops, sending up a small spray of sparks, and for a moment, the room is filled with the rich scent of wood smoke and the faint sweetness of dried herbs hung from the rafters in hopeful memory of warmer days. A quirky detail comes to mind: how, in some regions, people hung charms or sprigs of evergreen above the bed, believing they would ward off illness or evil spirits that prowled the night. You glance at the dark beams overhead and think perhaps you'll try that tomorrow, if only for the comfort of feeling you've done something to keep the cold and its dangers at bay. The night stretches on. You shift beneath the blankets, feeling the rough wool against your skin, the soft weight of a child's arm thrown across your side, the steady warmth of the dog's back against your feet. The fire dies down, leaving only a faint glow. You close your eyes, listening to the wind, feeling the cold press close around your small island of warmth, and hope that morning will come swiftly. Sleep comes in fits and starts. You drift, wake, drift again, caught in the half-light of dreams where spring has returned, where the sun warms your skin, where the fields are green and the river runs fast and full. Then a draft brushes your cheek, and the dream fades, placed by the reality of winter's long, dark night. Historians still debate whether medieval folks spoke of winter nights as endless. But to you, here and now, it feels true, and yet you endure. The cold may seep in, but your little huddle of warmth, a family of shared breath and blankets, holds it at bay for another night. The dawn spills its pale light through the shuttered window, doing little to chase away the chill that clings stubbornly to the air inside your hut. You wake slowly, joints stiff, breath fogging in front of your face. The fire has burned low, leaving only a bed of red coals that glow faintly beneath the ash. Hunger gnaws at your belly, a hunger that the cold only seems to sharpen. You wrap yourself in your cloak and rise. The floor icy beneath your feet, despite the layer of straw you scattered there the night before. Every movement feels heavy in the cold, lifting the pot from its hook over the hearth, stirring the hardened remains of yesterday's meal with the handle of a spoon, poking at the fire to bring it back to life. The morning meal is not a feast. It is whatever can be spared. You scrape out the pot's contenta, congealed mixture of barley, root vegetables, and a few precious scraps of pork fat. It smells earthy, smoky, with a sour temp from the long simmering. The fat has risen and hardened overnight, leaving pale streaks across the surface. You add water, hoping to stretch it further, and hang the pot back over the revived fire. The flames catch on the small kindling you've added, crackling softly, sending up the sweet, sharp scent of burning wood. You crouch close, warming your hands, feeling the heat bloom against your skin. The stew begins to loosen, the fat melting, the broth thickening. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers followed set recipes or simply relied on instinct and necessity. Looking at your pot, the answer feels clear. Survival doesn't leave much room for ceremony. You add what you have, maybe a pinch of salt saved from better times, perhaps a sliver of dried herb if any remain on the rafters. The goal is simple. Warmth, strength, another few hours of endurance against the cold. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. You recall hearing how in some villages it was said that adding ale or cider to a stew or porridge in the morning would help wake the blood and fortify the spirit against winter's chill. You glance at the small jug on the shelf, the liquid inside precious, and wonder if today is one of those days. After a moment's pause, you pour just a little into the pot, watching the broth darken, steam rising fragrant and strong. Outside, the world remains wrapped in frost and silence. The only sound beyond your walls is the faint creak of tree limbs heavy with snow, the occasional caw of a hungry crow. But inside, your hut is filled with the hopeful smells of cooking, the promise of heat, of nourishment, of another small victory over the cold. You ladle the stew into wooden bowls, handing them to your family if you are not alone, or settling yourself on the low stool if you are. The first spoonful burns your mouth slightly, but you welcome it, feeling the warmth spread down your throat and into your belly. The flavors are simple barley's chew, the sweetness of carrot, the salt of pork, but together they feel like comfort. The dog edges closer, drawn by the scent, curling at your feet with hopeful eyes. You drop a crust of hard bread into your own bowl, watching it soften, soaking up the broth before you eat it. Each bite is deliberate, measured. You know the stew must last the day. There may be no more until the morrow. The children, if you have them, eat quietly, focused, their cheeks pink from the heat of the fire. Their fingers are red and raw, despite their mittens. But now they hold their bowls close, savoring the warmth as much as the food. You glance at them, heart-sore and proud, knowing that each meal keeps them strong enough to face another cold dawn. You take a sip from your cup, hail thinned with hot water, barely more than a memory of stronger drink, but it warms your chest. And that is enough. And the fire crackles, the stew simmers low again as you set the pot to keep warm, and for a time, the world feels bearable. Historians still debate whether these small meals were seen as pleasure or mere necessity in winters. Grip. You suspect they were both. The stew, the bread, the leech, is a comfort, each a reminder that you are still here, still fighting, still surviving. You sit for a moment longer, letting the warmth of the food and the fire seep into you. Outside, the cold waits. But for now, you have this: a full belly, a fire that burns, and the strength to face whatever the day may bring. The cold outside feels heavier today, as if winter itself presses down upon the world with a deliberate weight. Inside your small hut, the fire burns low but steady, casting a warm glow on the familiar shapes of your few possessions. But as much as the fire helps, you know it cannot keep the cold entirely at bay, not without help from another unlikely source: the animals you share your world with. You pull on your cloak, it's patched and worn, and step outside. The air is sharp, biting at any skin left uncovered. The snow crunches under your boots as you make your way to the barn. The animals greet you with soft, muffled sounds: the lowing of the cow, the bleating of the goats, the cluck of chickens, restless in the gloom. Their breath steams in the icy air, mingling with yours as you step inside the barn's dim shelter. The barn itself is little protection from the cold. The thatch roof sags under the weight of snow, and gaps between the boards let in bitter drafts. You check the animals' water first, breaking the thin crust of ice that has formed overnight. The cow nuzzles your hand as you do so, grateful in its own way. You scatter fresh straw, adding to the thin bedding that's already damp and flattened from use. Historians still argue whether it was common practice for medieval peasants to bring animals indoors during the worst of winter, or whether that was reserved for the most desperate times. Today, you don't care about the debate. You care about surviving the night. One by one, you lead the smaller animals back toward the hut. The goats are reluctant, tugging at their ropes, but the promise of warmth and, perhaps, a stolen bite from your stores coaxes them along. The chickens shuffle together, seeking safety in numbers. Even the dog circles the group, as much to herd them as to find its own way back to the fire's warmth. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some regions, folk believe that sharing your hearth with animals on a holy night could bring good fortune, or even allow you to hear them speak at midnight. You smile faintly at the thought, the absurdity of it, almost a comfort against the cold. Inside the hut, you make space for your unusual guests. The goat settles near the door, its sides heaving from the exertion of the walk. The chickens cluster. In a corner, feathers fluffed, heads tucked beneath wings. The dog sprawls near the fire, sighing with relief as the heat seeps into its bones. The air is filled with the mingled scents of smoke, straw, and animal musk. It's not pleasant, not exactly, but it's warm. And in winter, warm is all that matters. The animals' bodies add their heat to the room. Raising the temperature just enough to take the edge off the cold, you sit again near the hearth, watching the fire, listening to the soft sounds of breathing ears, the dogs, the animals. The wind rattles the shutters, but inside, you've created a small island of life against the vast cold beyond. Historians still debate whether medieval folk saw their animals as true partners in survival or simply as property. But tonight, as you rest beside your strange company, you know the truth. In winter, all warmth is welcome, no matter where it comes from. The night's cold lingers stubbornly into the morning, a reminder that winter's grip has not loosened despite your best efforts. The animals shift restlessly in their corners of the hut, their breath misting the air, their body heat having kept the frost from creeping too close during the long hours of darkness. You rise slowly, shoulders aching from the weight of blankets and the tension of huddling against the chill. Today, like every day, your thoughts turn to the small, constant battle, keeping the cold out and the warmth in. Your hut is sturdy, or so it seemed in the warmer months. The walls of wattle and daub, once smooth and solid, now show cracks where the freezing wind has worked its way in. The thatched roof, so carefully laid last spring, sags under the weight of snow, and here and there you see the faint glimmer of frost creeping down the inside of the timbers. You begin your inspection, moving slowly around the small space. With scraps of cloth, straw, and whatever else can be spared, you stuff the gaps where the wind whispers through. At the window, a simple shutter covered with oiled cloth rattles with each gust, and you drape a heavy piece of fabric over it. Tacking it in place with small wooden pegs, historians still argue whether such makeshift insulation methods were common knowledge or desperate improvisation. As you wedge straw along the base of the door, you know it doesn't matter. Whether taught by your elders or invented out of necessity, the goal is simple. Keep the cold at bay for one more night. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some villages, people hung charms of iron or sprigs of holly above their doors and windows in winter, believing these would ward off not only the cold but evil spirits that might ride in on the wind. You glance at your bare doorway and make a note to fetch a sprig from the hedgerow. When next you brave the outdoors, your hands grow numb as you work. The cold creeping in despite your layers. The fire burns low. You've been rationing wood more carefully with each passing day, but you feed it another log. Watching the flames leap up, casting dancing shadows on the patched walls. The heat is small, but immediate, and you crouch near it for a moment. Letting your fingers thaw, the animals murmur quietly, the dog lifting its head to watch you with tired eyes. The chickens scratch half-heartedly at the straw, while the goat settles its head on its folded legs, content for now. The smells of smoke, damp wool, and warm animal breath fill the air. Not pleasant, perhaps, but familiar and oddly comforting in their way. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the hut, making the shutters creak and the roof groan under the weight of ice and snow. Inside, you listen to these sounds and feel the small satisfaction of knowing you've done what you can. Cracks are stuffed, the draft slowed, the fire burning. Now that is enough. Historians still debate whether medieval homes were truly thought of as refuges or merely as thin barriers between family and the elements. As you settle back near the hearth, the patchwork of your efforts around you, you know your answer. It is both. The hut may be fragile, but it is yours, and tonight it will hold. The heart of your home beats in the hearth's glow, and this morning it calls for your full attention. The fire burns low to land. You know that without its warmth, the cold will creep in faster than you can layer on cloaks or stuffed gaps. In the walls, you kneel by the hearth, prodding the embers with a stick, watching as a faint line of smoke curls upward, reluctant, lazy. The coals glow dully beneath the ash, their heat nearly spent. You gather your kindling, small twigs, splinters from split logs, dry straw if you can spare it. Your hands work swiftly despite the cold, arranging the materials just so, coaxing flame from the weary coals. You blow gently, the breath misting in the cold air before it meets the waiting fire. A flicker, a crackle, the first tiny promise of heat tanned, then the flame catches, licking upward, eager and hungry. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants kept their fires burning night and day through winter or risked letting them die down, fearing the cost of fuel more than the misery of a cold hearth. As you feed the blaze, you know your choice. The fire is too precious to lose, too central to life in the frozen months. The hearth itself is simple. A pit lined with stones, blackened from years of smoke and flame. Above it, the air is dark with soot, the beams streaked with the memory of 100 fires past. Around it, the tools of warmth and survival. The iron pot that holds your stew. The tongs for shifting coals. The spit for roasting when meat is found. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. You once heard how in some households, the hearth fire was considered sacred, and letting it die out was seen as a sign of misfortune or ill omen. Some even carried embers from their family hearth when they moved to a new home, a piece of the old fire to bless the new. You glance at your flames now, feeling that weight of meaning, that quiet bond with generations before. The fire grows stronger, its heat reaching out, filling the small space with the scent of wood smoke, sharp and sweet. The animals shift closer, drawn by instinct to the warmth. The dog lays its head on its paws, sighing as the heat seeps into its tired bones.
Oh.
The goat settles nearby, content to steal a little of the fire's gift. The chickens cluck softly in the corner, feathers fluffed, half asleep. You add another log, watching the flames leap higher, feeling the warmth on your face, your hands, your heart. This small fire is your defense against the endless winter, your partner in the battle against the cold. Historians still debate whether the hearth was seen simply as a tool or as the true center of the medieval home, its spirit and soul. As you sit back on your stool, listening to the crackle of the fire, you know your answer. The hearth is life, and today at least, it burns strong. The air inside your hut hums faintly with the warmth of the revived fire, but your mind is already turning to the task that waits beyond the walls. The woodpile, once a proud stack near the door, has dwindled to a worryingly small heap. You stare at it for a long moment, weighing the risk, the effort, the absolute necessity of replenishing it. There's no avoiding it. Today you must venture out and gather more fuel. You layer yourself carefully, tunic upon tunic. Leggings wrapped tight with wool strips, your heavy cloak pulled close and tied snug at the neck. So many times they're more seam than fabric. Cover your hands and boots stuffed with straw, protect your feet as best they can. Each piece of clothing is another line of defense against the cold that waits beyond your door. You step outside, breath fogging instantly, boots crunching on the crusted snow. The wind cuts at your face, sharp as a blade, and you lower your head. Against it, the path to the woods is familiar, but today it feels longer. Each step, an effort as the snow clings to your legs and the ice beneath tries to steal your footing. Historians still argue whether firewood gathering was a communal duty or a solitary daily struggle for each household. As you trudge onward, the bundle of rope at your side ready to bind your load, you feel the solitude of it keenly. This task is yours and yours alone today. The forest stands quiet, the trees like dark sentinels against the endless white. Search for fallen branches, first dry wood that will catch quickly, burn hot. The axe hangs heavy at your hip, a reminder of the harder labor that might await if you find no dead wood ready for the taking. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some places, families dried animal dung for use as fuel when wood grew scarce. You wrinkle your nose at the thought, but file it away, perhaps a last resort. But a resort all the same. You find a fallen limb half buried in snow and set to work. The axe bites into the wood, the sound of splitting echoing through the still air. Each stroke feels heavier than the last, your arms aching with the effort, sweat chilling the moment it forms beneath your layers. You work steadily, binding the cut branches into a bundle, securing them with your rope, lifting the load to your back. The return journey is harder. The weight of the wood drags at your shoulders. Your breath comes in hard bursts that fog and freeze on your scarf. The wind has picked up, driving snow into your face, stinging your eyes, numbing your cheeks. But home waits ahead, the promise of the fire's warmth spurring you on. You reach the hut at last. Fumbling with the latch, stumbling inside. The heat of the fire, faint though it is, feels like salvation. You lower your load, add a log to the blaze, and sit for a moment, catching your breath, letting the warmth seep back into your bones. Historians still debate whether medieval folk ever felt truly prepared for winter, or whether each day was another small battle in an unending war. Against the cold, as you watch the flames rise higher, you think, it's the battle that matters, and today at least, you have won. The air in your hut hums faintly with the sound of the fire's crackle, a small victory against the cold pressing at your door. But as you sit near its warmth, you can't help but let your thoughts drift beyond your own humble home toward the great stone keep that towers over the village. Its silhouette, dark against the gray winter sky, seems to promise safety, but you know better. Castles or fortresses is but against men, not winter. Inside those massive walls, the cold reigns as surely as it does in your own hut. The Lord's great hall, vast and echoing, offers little comfort. The hearths burn large fires, but the heat barely reaches beyond the immediate circle of flame. The stone walls seep chill into the room. The flagstones beneath are as cold as the frozen earth outside, and the drafts slip through cracks too. Ancient, and too many to seal. Historians still argue whether life in the castle during winter was a true privilege or simply a different kind of hardship. You suspect it depends on where one sits. Perhaps the lord and lady, wrapped in furs, seated nearest the largest hearth, feel some small comfort. But for their servants and retainers, huddled at the edges of the hall, the cold bites just as cruelly. As it does here, you picture the scene. The fire in the massive hearth. Logs the size of small trees stacked high, flames leaping, smoke curling up into the darkened rafters. Around it, the nobility cluster, their breath still visible in the chill air despite the blaze. Farther out, the lesser folk shift uncomfortably, seeking scraps of heat that never quite reach them. A quirky tidbit comes to mind in some castles. Bed curtains and heavy tapestries weren't just decoration, they were essential insulation. Great beds became small rooms of their own, curtained off to trap the warmth of sleeping bodies. Even so, frost often formed on the inside of stone walls, and water left out overnight could freeze solid. Your own hut, humble though it is, begins to feel like the better place. The walls may be thin, the roof thatched rather than tiled, but the fire's warmth reaches every corner. You have no need to share it with dozens, no vast, cold spaces to heat in vain. Historians still debate whether castles symbolize true refuge, in winter, or merely offered the illusion of safety and comfort. As you sip your thin ale, watching your modest fire burn, you think, stone may keep out armies, but it does little against the relentless cold. And tonight, in your small space filled with warmth and life, you feel richer than the Lord in his grand frozen hall. The cold creeps back with the night, as it always does, settling into every crack and corner, wrapping itself around your hut like a second skin. Inside, the fire burns low but steady, and you sit close, hands stretched toward its fading heat. But tonight, your thoughts turn to another source of worry, the precious stores of food that must see you through the rest of winter's long siege. You rise, moving slowly, joints stiff, and lift the lid of the small chest where you keep your supplies. Inside, the truth is plain. The sacks of grain are lighter than they were, onions fewer, their papery skins rustling softly as you shift them. A bundle of garlic hangs nearby, its scent sharp in the cold air. Beneath it all, a few shriveled apples, their skins puckered and soft. Near the hearth, the salt pork hangs, its fat glistening in the firelight. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants planned their stores with care at the start of winter, or whether hunger forced them into constant improvisation as the season wore on. You suspect it's a little of both. You planned? Certainly, you did all you could. But winter always lasts longer than you hope, and hunger always comes sooner. You measure out a small portion of barley, adding water from the barrel kept near the door, breaking the ice that forms overnight across its surface. A scrap of pork joins the pot more for flavor than for any real sustenance. You hang the pot over the fire, stirring slowly as the broth begins to warm. A quirky tidbit floats through your mind in some villages. The pot never truly emptied during winter. Stew simmered constantly, with each meal's remnants forming the base of the next. A living broth, as much tradition as necessity. You stir your pot thoughtfully, imagining the connection between meals, between days, between winters long past and winters yet to come. The scent of cooking fills the hut, rich despite its simplicity. The barley softens, the broth thickens, and the cold seems, for a little while, to retreat beyond the reach of the fire's glow. You ladle the stew into your bowl, adding a crust of hard bread to soak in the hot liquid. The first bite is a balm, warmth spreading through your chest, down to your fingers and toes. The dog stirs from its place by the fire, hopeful eyes watching each movement of your spoon. You break off a small piece of bread, softened with broth, and offer it. It is accepted with quiet gratitude, and you both settle again. Sharing the comfort of the meal and the hearth's fading light, historians still debate whether such simple meals offered real comfort or merely kept hunger at bay. While you finish your bowl and set it aside, listening to the wind rattle the shutters, you think, in winter, there's little difference between the two. The pale light of morning filters through the small gaps in your shuttered window, illuminating the frost that feathers the inside edges of the walls. You rise slowly, joints stiff, breath misting before your face, the cold inside your hut not much gentler than that outside. But today brings with it a necessity you've long tried to postpone: the road calls. Your stores are too thin, the woodpile too small, and so you must set out for the next village, hoping for trade aid, or simply to return safely with something that will ease the winter's grip. You dress carefully, layering tunic over tunic, wool over linen, cloak over all. Your boots, lined with straw, are tied tight around your ankles. Your mittens, patched and fraying, still manage to keep most of the cold at bay. You tie your hood low, the fabric stiff with frost where your breath froze upon it the day before. The road is no road at all. Today just a memory of a path beneath the deep drifts of snow. Each step is a gamble. Will your foot find solid ground or slip on hidden ice? The wind bites at your face, steals the warmth from your breath before it even leaves your lips. The world is white and gray, sky and earth blurring into one at the horizon. Historians still argue whether medieval folk avoided travel entirely in winter or simply braved it out of need, knowing the risks but having no choice. As you trudge forward, you know which camp you belong to. Hunger drives you, surely as it has driven countless others before. Landmarks look strange beneath the snow, the leaning tree at the bend in the path, now bowed beneath ice, the boundary. Stone between villages, rimmed with frost. The frozen stream, a silver scar across the land. You move carefully, staff in hand, testing the ground before each step. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some places, travelers carried sprigs of evergreen, or charms sewn into their cloaks, believed to guide them through storms or protect against frostbite. You smile at the thought, your fingers numb even inside your mittens, and think any charm worth its salt would warm your toes right about now. At last the next village comes into sight, smoke rising from chimneys. The promise of shelter, and perhaps a deal to be made. You knock at the first door with a numb hand, greeted by wary but not unkind faces. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of wood smoke and stew, and the warmth is so welcome it almost aches. You trade what little you can spare a tool. A length of threadbare cloth, a promise of future labor for a bit of grain, perhaps a wedge of cheese, anything that will help. And then it's time to return, the cold deepening, the light fading. But home pulling you on. Historians still debate whether these winter journeys were seen as bravery or desperation. As you trudge the long road back, you think, perhaps they are one and the same. You reach your hut as the last light of day fades, feet heavy, hands clumsy with cold. But even as you shed your cloak, brush the snow from your boots, and crouch near the fire, you feel another, more worrying chill settling deep in your chest. Your throat is raw from the biting wind, your head aches dully, and your limbs feel leaden, not just with fatigue, but with the first signs of the winter sickness that so often follows these desperate journeys. You sip weak ale warmed by the fire, hoping its heat will ease the ache behind your eyes. But the relief is fleeting. Now the cold inside you is harder to fight than the one beyond the door. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak, draw closer to the fire, and feel the weight of winter press down anew. Historians still argue whether medieval folk understood the connection between the harshness of winter living and the spread of illness, or whether they saw sickness as a punishment from above, a trial to be endured with faith. As you cough into your sleeve, throat burning, you suspect it matters little sickness is a companion no one invites, but many must suffer. You reach for the small bundle of dried herbs near the hearth-thyme sage yarrow. Their scent is faint, but comforting. You crumble them into hot water, making a bitter tea that you sip slowly, the warmth seeping into you, bringing a small, fleeting relief. A neighbor once swore by garlic steeped in ale, another by honey mixed with vinegar. You try what you have, knowing that whether it cures or not, it gives the comfort of action. A quirky tidbit drifts through your weary mind. In some villages, folk would place onions beneath their beds or hang them from rafters, believing they drew sickness out of the body. You glance at your store of onions, wondering if perhaps it is worth the attempt. The fire burns low. You add another log, the effort making your head swim, your breath shallow. The dog curls at your feet, sensing your discomfort, its warm body a small comfort against the chill that no number of cloaks can fully banish. Historians still debate whether winter illness was more feared than hunger, or if the two were so entwined. That one always brought the other. As you rest against the hearth, listening to the wind outside, feeling the fever's heat rise within you, you think, Both are enemies, and both must be endured. You close your eyes, letting the fires glow. Fill the darkness behind your lids, and breathe slow and steady. Tomorrow will come. And with it, another battle in winter's long war. The night is long, as winter nights always are, but this one feels a little different. Tonight there is a summons from beyond your own small hearth, a call that draws the village together in shared defiance of the cold. Wrap yourself in your heaviest cloak, pull your hood low, and step out into the crisp darkness. Following the glow of torchlight and the hum of voices carried on the wind, the villagers gather in the common green, near the small chapel where a great bonfire crackles and roars against the night. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, mingled with the sharper scent of pine and the sweet tang of cider heating in iron pots. Faces glow red and gold in the firelight, their breath visible as mist in the cold air. Historians still argue whether these gatherings, whether held for saints' days, midwinter feasts, or echoes of older rites, were primarily acts of faith or simple necessities of morale. As you approach the fire and feel its heat wash over your frozen skin, you understand that the line between the two blurs easily in winter. A quirky tidbit drifts to mind in some regions. Folk believed leaping over the bonfire would bring good fortune for the year ahead, a sign of courage and a ward against illness. You watch as a few bold souls try it, their boots sending up showers of sparks, their laughter ringing out into the night. You accept a small cup of warmed ale at surface, shimmering with the faintest trace of oil from the spices within. The drink is weak, but the heat spreads through you, loosening stiff muscles, steadying your hands. Someone starts a song old, familiar, the tune wavering at first but gaining strength as more voices join. Children dart about at the edges of the firelight, cheeks pink, eyes bright, their laughter light as falling snow. The elders stand close together, their faces lined by age and cold alike, watching the young with quiet pride. The fire burns high, sparks spiraling upward toward the stars, as if carrying the village's hopes with them into the dark. But all gatherings must end. The wood burns down, the cider is finished, and one by one, families turn back toward their homes, their hearts lighter for this shared warmth, their spirits braced once more for winter's long road. Historians still debate whether such nights made the cold easier to bear or simply offered fleeting distraction. As you step back inside your hut, cheeks still warm from the fire, you think, sometimes distraction is enough. Morning breaks reluctantly, the sky outside your shuttered window heavy with clouds, the light dim and gray. Inside your hut, the fire smolders low, casting a faint glow over the familiar shapes of your belongings and the small forms still curled. Beneath blankets near the hearth, the children sleep deeply, their breath misting faintly in the cold air. Cheeks flushed with the warmth they've managed to keep through the night. You rise quietly, wrapping your cloak tightly around your shoulders, and move to the fire. Your hands stiff with cold, feed at small slivers of wood at first, coaxing the embers back to life. The flames catch slowly, stretching upward. The cold that has crept close during the night begins to retreat. Just a little. Historians still argue whether medieval families saw children as burdens in the lean times of winter or as essential helpers, whose small efforts made all the difference. As you watch yours stir from sleep, blinking at the light of the rekindled fire, you feel only pride in love and the deep, driving need to keep them safe through the coldest days. You prepare their meal, a thin porridge. Barley or oats, simmered with water, perhaps a little milk if any remains. If fortune smiles, a drizzle of honey or a scattering of dried berries sweetens the pot. The smell is simple but comforting, filling the small space with a reminder that warmth can come not just from fire, but from food, from ritual, from care. Children eat quietly at first, still waking, their hands wrapped around their bowls, drawing warmth from both the food and the vessel. As they eat, they begin to chatter softly, voices rising and falling like bird song in the hush of the morning. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some villages, charms were tied around children's necks during winter, small carved tokens, or stitched pouches filled with herbs, believed to ward off illness and misfortune. You glance at your little ones and wish you had such a charm for them, but know that the true protection lies in the fire you tend, the food you provide, the blankets you wrap tight around them each night. When the bowls are empty, the children take up small tasks without complaint. One gathers kindling, another shakes out blankets. A third scatters fresh straw across the floor to keep the damp at bay. Their faces are serious, their movements careful, and you see in them the same quiet strength that winter demands of all. Historians still debate how much children understood of the danger that winter posed, whether they felt the fear or only sensed it reflected in the faces of their elders. As you watch them move through the morning light, you think, perhaps they know enough, and that is both burden and gift. The cold persists, as relentless as ever, but the day calls for a duty that even winter cannot postpone. As you step outside, the chapel bells toll softly across the frosted fields, their sound muffled by the thick air, but insistent all the same. It is time to join the others, to gather not just for prayer, but for the comfort of shared presence. For the reminder that no one bears winter's burden alone, you wrap yourself in layers, tugging your hood low as the wind tugs at your cloak. The path to the chapel is packed hard with snow, trodden by many feet, but still treacherous with hidden ice. Each step demands care, your staff testing the ground ahead, your breath a steady fog before your face. The chapel looms ahead small and simple, its stone walls etched with frost. Inside, it offers no true warmth. The walls are cold. The flagstone's colder, but candles flicker bravely in the gloom, casting pools of golden light where faces glow faintly in the dimness. Historians still argue whether these winter gatherings were acts of faith, habit, or necessity, a way to steal the spirit as much as to honor the divine. As you kneel, hands clasped, breath misting before your lips, you feel the quiet strength that comes from being among others who share your struggle. The priest's voice rises and falls. Words of endurance, of hope, of the promise that light returns after darkness. His breath, too, is visible in the cold air, his voice steady, despite the chill that seeps through every crack. Around you, the villagers bow their heads, some murmuring prayers, others simply listening, drawing what comfort they can. A quirky tidbit surfaces in your mind. In some places, folk believed that attending Mass on the coldest days earned special blessings, marks of courage as much as piety. You smile faintly, breath fogging, and think that if so, the village must be blessed indeed this winter. When the service ends, you linger a moment, feeling the hush that follows shared prayer, the fragile peace before the cold claims your bones once more. Then you step back into the biting air, heart a little steadier, feet a little surer. Historians still debate whether such gatherings truly eased the weight of winter, or simply offered brief respite. As you make your way home, snow crunching beneath your boots, you think even a respite has its place. By the time you return from the chapel, the weak winter sun hangs low in the sky, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The cold has deepened, seeping into your bones despite the layers you wear. But no matter how weary, the work of winter does not wait. The afternoon belongs to the quiet, steady tasks that keep your household prepared for the long nights ahead. You set yourself near the hearth, the fire burning low but steady, its warmth a small comfort against the chill that presses at your eye. Door. Before you lies your collection of tools, the axe dulled from splitting wood, the knife nicked and worn from daily use, the sickle that, though idle in winter, will be needed soon enough. Each must be tended if it is to serve you when the time comes. Historians still argue whether winter was seen by medieval folk as a time of rest or of constant preparation. As you pick up your whetstone and draw it slowly along the edge of your blade, you know the answer. Winter is no rest. It is a season of vigilance, of small labors that together hold the cold at bay. The scraping of stone on steel fills the room, a rhythm as familiar as the crackle of the fire. The dog lifts its head to watch you, then sighs and settles again, content in the warmth of the hearth. The goat shifts in its corner, and the chickens cluck softly, settling into their straw. Outside, The wind rattles the shutters, a reminder of the world beyond your walls. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some villages, folk believe singing while sharpening tools brought good fortune, or that certain tunes could charm the blade to work better in the seasons ahead. You hum quietly now, not for luck perhaps, dumb, but for the comfort of old habit. The children, if you have them, join in their own small weight-twisting wool into uneven thread, mending small tears in clothing, gathering the last of the kindling from corners where it was overlooked. Their work is clumsy, but earnest. Again, you feel a swell of quiet pride at their efforts. The fire burns brighter as you feed it another log, the warmth reaching your fingers, your cheeks, your heart. The tools, sharpened and set aside, gleam faintly in the flickering light, ready for the next day's labor. Historians still debate whether these long winter afternoons of simple work were burdens or blessings. As you lean back, the weight of the day easing from your shoulders, you think, perhaps they are both. In the rhythm of small tasks lies the strength to endure. The night settles in with a heavy quiet, the kind that makes every creak of the walls, every sigh of the wind, seem louder than it should. You sit near the hearth, watching the fire burn low, the embers glowing soft and red beneath the ash. Animals doze nearby, the dog stretched out, the goat folded small, chickens roosting in their corner all. Of them part of this fragile circle of warmth and life you've carved out against winter's endless dark. But as the fire fades and the wind rises again, your thoughts drift beyond your own small shelter. You think of the travelers, the messengers, the peddlers, the pilgrims who even now might be on the road, caught between one village and the next, seeking shelter where they can. The winter spares no one, but on the open road its cruelty is. Sharpest of all, historians still argue whether winter travel was common among medieval folk or a last resort, braved only out of desperation or duty. As you listen to the wind batter your walls, you imagine the courage or folly of those who take to the road in a season like this. You picture them hunched beneath heavy cloaks, boots caked with ice, breath fogging the air before their faces. They trudge through snowdrifts, past trees bare and black against the sky, over frozen streams that crack and groan beneath their weight. Every step, a test of strength, of will, of hope. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some regions, travelers tucked tiny charms bits of iron, sprigs of evergreen into their sleeves or belts, believing these tokens would ward off frostbite or guide them safely through storms. You smile faintly at the thought, wondering what charm might have kept the cold at bay during your own last journey. You glance at the door, imagining a knock, the face of a stranger, pale with cold, asking for shelter. What would you offer? Place near the hearth, a share of your thin stew, a corner of the hut free of drafts. Hospitality is no luxury in winter. It is survival shared between souls who understand what the season demands. Historians still debate whether villages welcomed such travelers with open arms or with wary hearts, knowing the strain an extra mouth might bring. You think perhaps it was both, as all things are in winter, kindness tempered by caution, generosity edged with worry. You feed the fire one last log, watch the flames catch and grow, and let the warmth fill the small space once more. Outside, the night deepens, but inside, you have done what you can. The road is for others tonight. Your place is here, at the hearth, holding the cold at bay for one more night. Morning comes quietly, the kind of morning where the world seems to hold its breath. The snow glistens beneath a sky, brushed with pale gold, and for the first time in what feels like forever, the cold carries a different weight, still sharp, still present, but softened at the edges. You stand at your door, boots sunk deep in snow that now shows signs of yielding, and listen. Somewhere in the stillness, you hear the faint drip of meltwater. The long siege of winter is beginning, just beginning to falter. The sun lingers a little longer in the sky, its rays stronger, though still pale. The air smells different, to less of ice, more of earth, as if the land beneath the snow stirs in its sleep. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers marked this subtle change with ceremony or simply with quiet relief. As you stand there, cheeks pink with cold, but heart lighter than it has been, You understand why either might be true. After so many weeks of darkness and frost, the smallest sign of change feels like a gift. You go about your work with renewed energy. The woodpile, though low, seems enough for now. The stores, though thin, will likely carry you through to the next thaw. You lift your face to the sun, feel its gentle warmth on your skin, and breathe deeply of the cold, clean air. A quirky tidbit drifts through your mind. In some places, villagers would gather the first green shoots found beneath the melting snow, bringing them into the home as tokens of luck and reminders that the world always returns to life. You glance down and spotted a sliver of green near the base of the hut. Delicate but defiant. You crouch, brush away the snow, and touch the tender shoot with a finger gone numb from cold. The sight of it stirs something in you, a hope as fragile and as strong as the plant itself. Around you, the village begins to wake. Neighbors open doors, step out into the crisp air, and share small nods, small smiles, as if to say, "We have made it this far." The animals stir more eagerly. The dog lifts its nose to the breeze, sniffing the promise of change carried on the wind. Historians still debate whether these early signs of spring brought true comfort or cautious suspicion. Knowing winters tricks too well. As you step back inside, cheeks tingling with the memory of the sun's warmth, you think, perhaps both, but for today, hope is enough. The days lengthen slowly, almost shyly, as winter loosens its grip. Each morning, the sun climbs a little higher, stays a little longer, casting light that feels warmer on your face, though the air still holds its chill. The snow recedes inch by inch, revealing patches of dark, wet earth, and with them, the first true signs that the world is waking after its long slumber. You step outside, boots sinking into the softening ground, and listen. The hush of winter has changed. Now the world hums quietly with the sound of dripping water, a breeze rustling bare branches, of birds returning in cautious pairs to the trees. The cold still nips at your fingers, but it no longer feels endless. Historians still argue whether medieval folk celebrated the winter's passing with great rites, or simply turned their hands to spring's work without pause. As you walk the perimeter of your home, checking fences, eyeing tools, noting what must be mended and what can wait, you feel the truth of both. There is relief in the easing cold, but there is also work, always work. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. In some villages, folk would scatter the ashes from their hearth fires over their fields as a blessing for the planting to come. You make a note to do the same when the snow has fully gone, as if the warmth that kept you through the winter might now coax life from the soil. Inside your hut, fire burns lower these days, no longer a roaring defense, but a steady welcome. Presence. The animals, too, stir with new purpose. The dog noses at the door, eager for longer walks. The chickens scratch at the muddy ground, finding the first tender shoots. The goat bleats softly, as if sensing that the world is changing. You sit for a moment on the step, breathing deep, letting the weak sun warm your cheeks. Listening to the soft drip of melting snow and the faint song of a bird high in the trees. The hardest part of winter is behind you. Nights may still be cold, storms may yet come, but the balance has shifted. Now, let's slow everything down, let the pace soften, the words stretch gently as we move toward rest. You're safe now, in the quiet of your hut, the fire's glow, low and steady. The wind outside is just a whisper, a soft reminder of all that you've weathered. The earth beyond the walls is beginning to stir, but tonight, you don't need to worry about what comes next. Your work is done. The cold is retreating, the night is kind, and every breath you take fills you with calm. The heavy layers you've worn for so long seem lighter now, the blankets softer, the hearth's warmth deeper. Listen to the crackle of the last log, to the gentle hush of the world beyond. You've survived the long, hard winter. You can rest. Let the darkness cradle you. Let the promise of spring ease you into sleep. The hardest part is behind you, and all that remains is peace. End of script. Sweet dreams.